Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Changing in America, and of course, following years of disconnect between the establishment and the people, we are seeing a potential new leadership with Donald Trump and, of course, JD Vance. Let's get on with the show. Right, by now you guys already probably know that JD Vance is now going to be Donald Trump's running mate in this election. He's going to become the next vice president. A couple of things to talk about when it comes to Vance. Again, this whole video is about letting you guys know who this person is, in case you don't know, and now, of course, what he's going to be doing as part of the larger team with President Trump from, of course, next January onwards, unless something weird happens. Now, Vance is extremely talented. He's got high IQ. He's only a couple of years older than me, which is slightly depressing. Where am I and where is Vance right now? Yeah, it's a little bit different. But apart from all that, of course, he's highly educated. He's also always been a proper pro-freedom politician. And even when he was younger, he believes in smaller government and free market capitalism. He's against corporatism, and he's against, of course, the expansion of any sort of imperialist nonsense. But he's also a massive supporter of Israel. And he actually explains, I'm going to show you a video. He explains why we have to keep Israel as an ally. And of course, while being against America and the American troops and the British troops from going around the world, putting their foots on the ground and causing chaos, he's against that, but he's in favor of being close to our allies who are also fighting the same fight, which is global Islamism. Global Islamism is becoming a bigger problem because they are in the same bed with the international socialists, and this is becoming an issue because we're all sharing the same enemy. And there's a couple of other things which I'll talk about when it comes to Iran and his views on that. Now, Vance used to be an anti-Trump Republican. And of course, that was a few years ago when he was in his early 30s. And Trump decided to actually be a genius again by bringing him into the tent. And also yesterday's convention, the National Convention, was a very interesting event because they also brought in a number of people from different parts of the political spectrum to open the door to those who feel disillusioned when it comes to the Democrats as a party. They want them to also join the Republicans. But now he's explained why he was anti-Trump before and why he was proven wrong. But he said this, for example, when it comes to obviously the global stage and America being the world police, saying it's sort of weird that this town in Washington assumes that Israel and Ukraine are exactly the same. They're not, of course. And I think it's important to analyze them in separate buckets. Politicians need to better articulate how support for Israel is in America's best interest. It's also about what sort of support. That's the difference in Ukraine and Israel. And of course, all the other conflicts around the world. Israel is one of the most dynamic and technologically advanced countries in the world. The Israelis are doing the most important work to give us missile defense parity as well. So it's not really a one-way relationship, it's a two-way relationship. The idea that there is ever going to be an American foreign policy that doesn't care a lot about that slice of the world is, of course, yes, it's stupid because of who Americans are. And he's being honest about it. There is also a couple of other things to also focus on. But first, this was a reaction from Donald Trump Jr. saying Biden is stuck with the worst VP in the history of our nation. President Trump has one of the most dynamic young leaders in the country in JD Vance. We also have incredible patriots. There are so many others, including Bergam and Marco Rubio and many others who were also on the list of potential VPs. But to go back to actually focus on the issue with the Islamism. So obviously he said about Hamas saying they started the war against Israel and now they hide behind Palestinian civilians. So if you want to learn the lessons of the last 40 years, the most important thing is we have to defeat them as a viable military organization. You're never going to defeat the ideology, of course, but you can root out those commanders, those final military trained battalions, and I think you should empower the Israelis to do it. This goes back to the next point, which is also the most important point. the relationship between the Crown Prince of Iran in exile, Reza Pahlavi at the top, and Vance, and the whole Trump team. Of course, a few days ago, we had the National Conservatism Conference, where the Brits, the Europeans, and the Americans all got together to fight for conservative values, to fight for nationalism in all our countries. So nationalists from different countries supporting each other's nationalism, which is, again, what was needed and what was missing for decades against the fight, in the fight against the liberal globalists. And the reason that you have to differentiate, so you have to make up your mind. Do you want America to be the world police, like how it was before? Because even back then, even the last few decades, it has not been a moral world police. Because if you say, well, if some country gets invaded, and if there's a conflict, humanitarian causes would say, well, we have to go in and help them, right? But that's what they've been saying, but that's not what they've been actually doing, because the interventions, foreign policy interventions, were quite selective, depending on strategy, depending on the enemy of an enemy. You know, when we had issues in Yemen, we had issues in Sudan, you have people in Iran being occupied by the Islamic occupiers. America didn't intervene. But of course, when it was strategical, when it comes to Iraq, you know, they had their own vision for it, and of course natural resources, oil and everything else. There were a number of reasons to be around Iran. They did the interventions and it didn't work. And right now you could make the same argument. There are some people on an emotional level saying we should still obviously in a one-way relationship support Ukraine because it's just an innocent country that's been invaded, right? But that's not really the job of America if on that level, because there is literally dozens of big conflicts and overall hundreds of conflicts every year happening around the world. And if you just go with the basis, and I'm not saying it to say Ukrainian people don't matter, I'm not saying that, I'm simply saying if you're saying based on any sort of compassion, any sort of humanitarian crisis, America should go and basically go in there and put their boots on the ground, firstly, that's just not sustainable. And that's not really what they've been doing. But those who say, well, no, Ukraine, we have to, in a one-way relationship, support them because, again, it's against Russia. It's a proxy war against Russia. But again, there have been a lot of other examples that we could have done that, but didn't. There are obvious reasons. This is not really to say, for example, abandon ordinary Ukrainian civilians, or when it comes to what happened in Hong Kong a few years ago with the CCP, or what's happening with Taiwan. This is simply to make up your mind to see what the actual policy is going to be. People like Vance and Trump are saying the priority is, of course, when it comes to the relationship between the international socialists and the global Islamists, who are basically causing trouble for all of us, all our countries. And he's saying that we must support, for example, Iranian people. But again, not by sending the American troops to Iran, because that's not what the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi wants. That's not what Vance wants. That's not what Trump wants. And that's not what ordinary people want. That's not what Iranian people want either. Iranian people don't want a handout. Israelis don't want a handout. The whole point of the relationship with Israel as an ally is that it's two ways. And with Iran, with the future, a free democratic Iran, under the leadership of Reza Pahlavi and all the others, the whole point is that it's going to be a two-way relationship, not just handouts. It's not necessarily the same situation with Ukraine, where you're just giving out money and ammunition and there's nothing in return. The only thing in return is the hope that the Western side have, that it could weaken the Eastern globalists, Russia and China, all that. But that's the only thing that they have. But that conflict, because it's basically led by the Eastern globalists and Western globalists in Ukraine, it's just, there's this massive standoff. It keeps going and going and going. There's not going to be a winner. It's not like going to be like Ukraine will be eliminated or Russia will be eliminated. There has to be an end. There has to be some sort of conversation eventually. And it's not my job or your job. It has to be both sides to actually sort it out. It's different when it comes to the threats that are going around the world, when it comes to, of course, Islamism, because it's happening in our countries. It's not just in Israel. Israel is just a frontier. It's happening in all our countries from Australia to Canada. And that's the whole difference. And in terms of the relationship as well, it's not to say, forget about ordinary people in Taiwan who are going to get attacked by China. It's not about saying, forget about ordinary people in Ukraine or ordinary people in Yemen. It's about making up your mind. Do you want America to be the empire that's the world police that would just, then that means that he has to go everywhere. You have to be consistent. They have to go everywhere. Every country, they have to go and liberate them. You have to make a black and white, basically, choice. If you're going to be strategical, well, let's go to Vance and see what he says.
I think there actually is a hard-nosed strategic argument that we can make for why we should care about Israel too. Uh, let me just make a couple of points on that topic. So first, Israel is one of the most dynamic, certainly on a per capita basis, one of the most dynamic and technologically advanced countries in the world. Dan Senor wrote about this in the book, The Startup Nation. And if you look at what Israel is doing just with the Iron Beam system, for example, this is a system that would allow America and our allies to actually achieve some parity with the people who are sending drones and rocket attacks and so forth. There is no way that we can long-term fight a missile defense battle against people if they're paying 1/10 or 1/100th for offensive weapons that we are paying for defensive weapons. And the Israelis are doing the most important work to actually give us missile defense parity. That's a very important national security objective of the United States of America. And that's something we're working with one of the most innovative economies in the world to accomplish. There's another reason, actually, motivated by my view that America can't do everything. And that reason is quite simple. We have to sort of ask ourselves, what do we want out of our Israeli allies? And more importantly, what do we want out of all of our allies writ large? Do we want clients who depend on us, who can't do anything without us? Or do we want real allies who can actually advance their interests on their own, with America as playing a leadership role, but our allies actually doing something too? So my biggest criticism of our approach in Ukraine is that it has no strategic end in sight, and it's not leading anywhere that's going to ultimately be good for our country. But the second biggest criticism I make about the war in Ukraine and our approach to it is that we are subsidizing the Europeans to do nothing. The Europeans are not carrying their fair share of the burden, especially when it comes in provision of weapons, and they're deindustrializing their own country at the same time that they say that Putin must be defeated at all costs. If Putin must be defeated at all costs, to our German friends, then stop deindustrializing your own country in the name of a ridiculous green energy policy. But I actually think
That's the whole point as well, because again, they keep saying NATO, but it's not really NATO, it's America leading it. And the Europeans are not really contributing enough when it comes to the Ukraine support and everything else against Putin, if they really care about bringing down Putin, right? That's the whole, by the way, the public line isn't that we're going to bring down Putin. And that's where the dishonesty comes in. They simply say, oh, we just want to protect Ukraine. Oh, well, obviously, because they're going to go and invade it. We already know that. But we know that the main fight is for you to bring down Putin. And we know Putin is a troublemaker. But it's about you deciding what's the actual approach. Can you go in and invade Moscow? Well, you know you can't. So what are you going to do? America subsidizing the Europeans? That's the biggest issue. And by Europeans, I'm not just talking about Ukraine. I'm talking about the European Union. All these places. And this is, again, it makes things more complicated. And people become tribal. They say, well, I'm going to pick between Zelensky and Putin. I'm going to pick between President Xi and this. It's not about the leaders. Stop picking leaders. Or even Netanyahu. Or I'm going to pick Netanyahu's side. No, it's about ordinary people living in Israel. Ordinary people living in Ukraine, living in Taiwan, living in China. Ordinary people who are also, a lot of them are against President Xi. And this is the problem. Because when I was talking about, obviously, on paper, we know that Ukraine got invaded by a foreign force, and ordinary innocent Ukrainians are at, obviously, risk. And there are comments I can see in the live chat saying Ukraine is not innocent, because you've seen it as a football team. It's like Manchester United and Chelsea, or New York Giants and Jets. It's not really about Ukraine or the Ukrainian government or the establishment. Of course, there's been a lot of corruption inside the Ukrainian government. We already know that. They know that. Russia, also extremely corrupt. We already know that too. But when people say, well, innocent Ukrainian, but they're talking about ordinary people. Some of them are pro-Zelensky. Some of them are against Zelensky. Some of them really, really hate Putin. Some of them are like, well, we can live next to Russia as long as they don't attack us. So it's not really about picking sides in terms of the actual leadership. Do not pick government side. It's just stupid anyway. But some people do. Some people say, oh, I don't like Ukraine. I'm going to like Russia instead. Or I don't like Russia. I'm going to pick Ukraine. So I'm like, no. Just think about ordinary people and try not to have conflicts. That's the whole point. Totalitarians, thank you for your super chat saying not just Trump, it's Viktor Orban, Wilders, Xi Jinping, Putin, Leftism is a much bigger threat than Islamism alone. So obviously, not all these names are the same, because they're all different categories and they have different agenda when it comes to even opposing Islam specifically. Because Xi Jinping, for example, doesn't have a problem with Islamism. Of course he doesn't. He has a problem with the Islamic side having any sort of influence in China or even living like normal people in China. He has a problem with that. That's different. Wilders, obviously, he has a problem with also Islam and Islamism. But again, we know that for America, it's going to be hard to get rid of the actual religion or the ideology, Islam, mostly because of birth rate and the demographic change. But you can still fight against Islamism in terms of the actual imminent threat, at least, and the brainwashing. Irina says there needs to be a middle person with Ukraine and Russia to come to a resolution. But this is the other thing. I mean, there's no one that could be the middleman. China keep proposing themselves as the middle. You're not really impartial, are you, China? So we can't really have that. You're going to have a situation where, I mean, on paper, we cannot trust the United Nations with anything. But technically speaking, a United Nations institution is the only one that can at least hold some sort of negotiations. But it's not going to be easy. Both sides will have to continue, unfortunately, and I don't want them to continue, until both sides will lose something big over the next few months or over the next couple of years, because they seem to be a bit of a arrogance. Putin, on the one hand, he comes to the media, said, well, we could negotiate, but it doesn't actually negotiate. Zelensky, on the one hand, he gets pressured sometimes by the West saying, stop going too robustly. Stop saying you want to kill Putin, because it's not possible. It's not easy. And then on the other hand, it says, yeah, we could negotiate. Currently, they're just obviously bluffing each other, and nothing's going to get done for a while, unless something weird happens tonight and tomorrow morning they pick up the phone. But there has to be a resolution anyway. And everybody has their own ideas of what that means. The super chat saying Bob the Builder is protesting. Bob the Builder is outside the Azerbaijani embassy. Oh, the preacher. Bob. Yeah, Bob is actually a good guy, by the way. And London, 20th of July. Yeah. Can you be there? I am. I'm also. I'm part of it. Of course, I'll be there. I'm part of the whole thing. We were there last time as well, so hopefully you will be there. Of course, I'll be there. Star Helix, thank you for your super chat saying it's time for leaders to say the quiet part out loud. Love you, Maya. Hope we're still good. Of course, we are good. Star Helix, don't worry about it. Super chat, Maya is great. And Ariel says, hello from Israel, Thailand. Oh, Israel, Thailand at the moment. And I needed vacation. So happy with Vance as the VP nominee. He's very good. Oh, obviously, you don't have to agree with everything he says. And that's the whole point. You know, the issue, again, we have, while I said earlier about a lot of people see politics as some sort of football thing, where they pick sides between governments, they also do it with politicians. They somehow expect to find the perfect politician. There's no such thing as perfect politician or a perfect person. Even a best friend that you have, even a partner that you have, there will be things that you will disagree with. But it's about making compromises, it's about seeing the bigger picture. So Vance will have certain things that you might not like, but then he will have the bigger things that you would like. Same with Trump, same with the crown prince in Iran, and everybody else. Or even Netanyahu. He's not perfect. We know that. Rochelle says, call me crazy, but I quite like Putin. Yeah, you're crazy. Why would you like any politician that's in favor of centralization of powers and big government? Big government is a bad idea. I know a lot of people in the West are sick and tired of course, our weak and feeble politicians. And their solution is, yeah, basically we just need more centralization. No! You can't trust government with anything, let alone running everything every single day. It's just a complete craziness. Big government is bad. It's naughty. Using Fiction says, Trump and Vance are pulling in those who hate the Uni Party, Democrats and Republicans. The ones who say, we have our votes, doesn't matter, it's a different populism. That's an interesting point. And Fight Club as well saying, gays for Palestine, go Hamas, go, yay! I hope that's sarcastic, by the way. I really hope. I don't know. I can't tell these days anymore. Okay. What else do we have? Frank says, excellent. At last, someone sensible. It's about time. But enough about me. What about Vance? I don't know. I'm guessing you were talking about Vance. Unless you were talking about me. I'm definitely not sensible. I'm very radical. Tony's having a meltdown in the live chat saying, fake news, you need to be banned. Yes, Vance is not a real person, and Trump has nominated an AI artificial intelligence character, and this live stream is all fake news. The video I showed you of Vance is not the real Vance. He's not real. It's fake news according to Tony. None of this has actually happened, guys. Oh, brilliant. Rose says, Tusi, you really need to block this psychotic evil person. Who is the psychotic evil person? That would be an interesting one to see as well. If you have evil people in the live chat, feel free to ban them. You could block them on the live chat. Anyone evil. I mean, I don't mind evil. Just ignore the evil. But if you don't want to see them, block them as well. Anyway. Truth Seeker says Islam is a fascist ideology. It was also one of the original ideas of the one world government. Let's not forget. Shell says the dude loves his country and does a lot for them. So did Genghis Khan. I don't think he did. Well, you could say the same about President Xi. President Xi really loves China. And if you look at history of President Xi, he's a proper Chinese nationalist. But does that make him and his policies right? That's the whole point. Just because someone loves his country doesn't mean they're a good person, or doesn't mean they have the right ideas to run that place. This is the whole issue. People say, for example, well, but that person has nice hair. Well, so what? Or that person says that he likes the flag. Macron likes the French flag. Does that mean Macron's policies are actually right for France? Of course not. And that's not really good enough. You have to be at least a morally better person. But also, I don't really care about your inner morality as long as your actions and your policies are not restricting other people and increasing the size of government. That is a problem that I have. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining another live stream. And we're going to take a quick break and come back with more updates. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.